Okay, my name is Melanie Jacob, and this is Phil Jacob, and we're here to talk today about buy box at the Michigan Note Investor Forum, and it's about making your vision very clear. So as we go through this, you'll be able to hopefully define some of your own buy box. Let me move that. Okay, so go ahead, Phil.
Okay, so you might be wondering, what is a buy box? Here's the definition. A buy box is a conceptual framework used to define the criteria of a purchase. Hey, so what does that really mean? It means, what are the things that you're looking for that will help define whether you make a purchase or not? This is actually one of the most critical things that you need to understand if you're going to be a note buyer. Actually, in any aspect of real estate, this is actually one of the key things, because you'll look at a number of deals, but you'll find that many of those deals won't make it through your buy box. And your buy box needs to be around what you're looking for, and it'll be a great filter for doing your analysis.
Right. And you have to know what your goals are. And I guess that's one of the biggest things that defined some of our goals as we were starting out buying mortgage notes in 2018. And I have to admit, we did go out of our buy box a few times, and there's always consequences to going out of your buy box. So there's risk and reward for every investment. And you always see the disclaimers. When you make an investment, there is a risk that you may not get back any of your investment. But investors who are willing to take on more risky investments potentially could lose more money, but they could be rewarded for the risk. So in non-performing notes specifically, it is a higher risk area, and that's where we started. But we probably found that we got more rewarded as far as even learning how to run the business, as far as note business, and then identify which notes are best for which kind of investor or which kind of goal. So
for me, when you're looking at the risk reward, it's like, if I'm going to purchase a note, how much risk am I willing to take? And I'd be willing to take on more risk if I get a larger return. But if I get a small return, I want to be darn sure that my risk is low and I will get rewarded. And, as you're looking through different tapes and such, that's one of your key criteria. What am I getting? And for how much?
Okay, so right now, Phil and I are active note investors and real estate investors, which means we source our deals and we manage the deal. We handle the challenges, and it requires more time. I do this more day to day. Phil still has a W-2 job at Ford Motor Company. And passive, we have a number of passive people that invest with us. They like using their IRA money. They're more hands-off, although we consult them, and they're called venture partners. They have less time involved. But even people say, well, I like passive investing, like rental properties with the property manager. You're still involved. It's not really that passive. So we do a passive investing with this in a syndication, and Phil and I invested as limited partners this year in a hotel conversion. And so we just got a report this month on what's happening. And so we're not doing any of the work. We just put in our resources. So you can be both passive and active investors.
Now, one thing to note is, like, if you're just looking in the market, a good example of an active investor is someone who's going through looking at individual stocks, buying and selling on a frequent basis. But a passive investor may be somebody who just invests in a mutual fund. So there, you're not doing anything on a regular basis per se. Once you made the investment, all you're doing is you're looking at your returns over time.
Okay, so with mortgage notes, this is it could be, this little slide could be due diligence, but as you get a tape that has more list of mortgage notes, you want to understand a number of things. One is, how much does the collateral behind the investment really is it valued at? You want to know the note price, the original loan amount, like the current unpaid balance, the number of payments made, the number of payments remaining, the interest rate on the note, the principal and interest payment, and how much equity is would be the amount that would be behind your investment. Also, we look at comparable market rents. Even though it's a note, you're asking yourself, if in the worst case scenario, if I took back this house, what would the rent be here? And would I be able to, would it be worth my investment if I had to take it back and put it even into a rental? Although that's never our goal objectively. And today, two big things happened. We had a non-performing note where we had not received payment for over a year. We had done legal. It got extended for multiple reasons. And she had till today to reinstate. And we got a big payment today. So we got all the payments and the late fees for today on a non-performing note. However, the cost to us, the equity behind the investment was great. We had all kinds of options. We could have made it a rental. We could have turned it into a note. We could have sold it for cash. But she's made reinstated, which means she paid back all the arrearages. And so now we have a note that's called a fragile performing note. So the risk for her is that, will she default again? But we still have to pay the legal fees that we incurred and the higher servicing costs. And so there's things that happen in note investing that, you know, the benefit could be huge. We could have made $100K on the investment, but the cost of holding a non-performing note and managing it is that there is extra fees. So
yeah, so in other words, holding costs really should be on this list. But there's actually, when we're starting off doing our analysis in our buy box, number one is really the location that we're looking at. And then
I'm sorry, I didn't put that. Next one is
look, not only location, but we also look at, are we first lien, second lien, third lien? We personally only buy first lien, but that's due to our philosophy and what we're trying to do as a business.
I thought the next slide had a list of non-judicial states. So the location, what Phil said, is really important because certain states are non-judicial, meaning if you default on your mortgage, for example, Texas, you can send a demand letter and within 45 days or so, you'll have a decision of what's happening. And so certain states are more favorable for note investing.
Well, it all still comes back to the return,
yeah,
and the amount of risk you want to take. You go into places where it takes longer to foreclose, then you're going to want a larger payment or a larger return and lower risk that you will get that return. And those places where you can get a fast return, maybe you'll accept less.
And those notes are more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those notes are more expensive typically. So some of the calculations we do when we're looking at note investing and making a decision about what we're going to do is called investment to value, ITV. Also our investment to the unpaid balance, like what % of discount are you getting on buying the note? This has changed a lot. And we're not here to talk about the price points today because it is changing even as we speak. What's the equity position? How much yield will you get at the purchase price? Unfortunately, our speaker tonight was scheduled to come and speak, and he canceled because of health problems. But he was going to do a whole presentation on yield tonight. So I apologize, but we just put this together as sort of the last week, and hopefully you'll get something from it. The yield at the purchase price, again, that was what main topic, and then payment versus rent, which I talked about. So, for example, if you have a house that's worth 200,000, but you have a mortgage note that's worth 100,000, the loan to value is 50%. So half of the loan is valued at half of the price of the home. So the lower the loan to value, the better for risk. So even the banks, when they give you a HELOC, they want to make
Well-
sure there's like 25% equity behind, or 30% before they give you any kind of HELOC.
This really comes into play though. If you're looking at a performing note, then it's true. The loan to value, the lower the percentage, the better it is. On the other hand, if you're looking for a non-performing note, you want a high loan to value, because especially if you're buying first lien, because that means if there's a problem, you can more than likely clear the note yourself, versus having to deal with selling it and only getting
your note back.
and potentially having the homeowner litigate for the equity.
So like we have a note in Texas right now, and this note also has given us a little bit of trouble. It was a non-performing note when we bought it. We gave her a loan mod. She performed very good for 12 months. Then recently, earlier this year, she defaulted 90 days. We sent a demand letter. She reinstated with the full amount, and then she never paid us again. And now she's 60 days past due. So it's a good note, but even if we had to take back the house, we could only get the value of the note, which is probably 75% of the value of the house. So there would still be like 25% of the equity that we could potentially lose if we took back the house.
Yeah, someone else outbid us.
Yeah. Okay. Want to talk about external and
also, when you're looking at the buy box, you're going to want to know, what are you willing to accept? In notes, if you're purchasing notes, generally you only get to look at the external condition. And that's by hiring people to come and look at the house from the exterior, or you're looking at Google Maps and such. Internal condition, well, it's rare that we'll actually get to see what's in the house. Now, if you're doing like a seller finance note, you own it, so you know what this is. And if you're buying a seller finance note, there's a good chance that whoever is selling that note probably has been in the house and has taken pictures that you can see.
That's good.
Escrow amounts are things that you can see on the tape, but remember, that's owned by the borrower. Property taxes, that can be a huge impact. So that's something you need to look, and you got to consider, like if you're in a place like Houston, you're going to pay more in property taxes than you would in Canton, Michigan. So as you're looking at your buy box, you also want to know, hey, you're seeing how these things are increasing over time. Is it something you want to deal with or not? Or is your note or your borrower getting pushed to the limits of what they can afford to buy?
Yeah, when we always look at the paper, the property, and the person. And the person is any kind of information you get on the borrower, the name. We do white pages lookup. We try to get to look for them on Facebook if we can, to sort of see what we can tell about the story of this person. Sometimes we purchase notes with people who have gotten credit scores. That's helpful. If they don't have a credit score, they have a very low credit score, it's going to be harder for them to even have a refinance out of the note if they start doing better or they want to refinance. So these are some of the things that you would look at, but although it's not doesn't define your buyback box, but we did have one investor say, I won't buy any property that has a person without a credit score of 6 something or whatever. I mean, and we don't really even originate notes based on the credit score. We originate the notes based on the debt to income ratio. So we don't always use the credit score for this.
But you may choose
You
to
can.
as part of your buy box. So when you're looking at criteria, I think my wife has really laid this out well. You need to actually take that and kind of build out what are your criteria, like we discussed, for performing notes versus reperforming versus non-performing. She's given a couple of things here, but actually writing these out before you go and look for a note, understanding how those your criteria changes between these, because you might just say, hey, we want to operate only on non-performing notes and things, which is fine. Or you might say you
More
want
risk and
only
reward.
performing. That's fine, but your criteria between the two may be very, very different. Now, when you're looking at the risks in non-performing notes, like when we're looking at our buy box, we look heavily on what if we had to take the house back, and what are the foreclosure timeframes,
And costs.
we know that the holding costs, legal fees, and rehab costs can be huge. So when we're doing our analysis for does a property fit in our buy box or not, we normally look for the worst case. Now, if we're buying a pool of these, we'll actually look at it across multiple units, multiple notes if we have the same investor, and look at what are the probability for each one. But if you're looking at it as a one-off, in the way we look at it, we would definitely take into account the worst case and see, can we still make money on the note?
Right. So we set aside, even if we have a purchase price of, let's say we want to buy a note for that's 100,000 and we want to buy for 75K, we may add another 5K of legal fees and holding costs if we know it's a non-performing note. And that money is already sort of earmarked for all of the expenses that'll take place, and sometimes even adding forced place insurance when there's no insurance on the property. So again, know what your goal is. This slide was more from our multifamily kind of training. Do you want to invest in the debt? Do you want to invest in the equity? Do you want to invest in cash flow? Do you need to invest because you need tax benefits? We do a lot of investing with our Roth IRA, which helps us with our tax implications. Leverage, using your current investments to grow. I mean, there's all kinds of things.
And there are ways of now, if you own a bunch of notes, to actually borrow on those notes to get leverage to buy other new notes or such.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of opportunities, but once again, knowing what your buy box consists of will help you know what makes sense for you.
So basically, you have to adapt to what's happening. And I think this is what Phil and I have been trying to come into clarity again. I mean, we were very clear in 2018, 19, 20, COVID hit. There were no notes for sale or very poor quality notes. We created notes during that time. However, we sort of pivoted, went to look at multifamily investing, and we got training and all that. So we now know how to look at that, but you have to sort of know what's happening. And so one of the things, this is from Black Knight, and that they produce a report every quarter, and it's free. And basically there was 8.3 million forbearances in the United States. If you add the green and the gray together, that's about 85% of those forbearance plans either were removed because they started performing again, or they were removed because the loan paid off. And which leaves you about 15% of forbearances out there that potentially could end up on bank balance sheets, which could eventually end up in the secondary market. which is where we like to buy notes on the secondary market. And so we buy them because we buy them at a discount. It just shows that there's probably somewhere around 500,000 of notes out there. We don't know what states they're in. That didn't break down how many states, but we do know that there are some more notes out there. However, we do know that the distressed note industry probably has its lowest rate right now.
Lowest inventory
Right now compared to the last possibly 20 years.
Right. And if you look at this chart, really where the opportunities are the removed, expired, delinquent, active loss mitigation, that's 3%. And the removed, expired, delinquent, that's 4%. So you're looking at, excuse me, you're almost looking at about 600,000
right.
forbearance or homes that are in distress.
Right. So with us, we have a group of real estate attorneys that we work with if we have to do, demand letters, loss mitigation. We have all of our notes are boarded with a servicer. The servicer sends if they're late, they keep track of the payments, they keep track of the escrow, they pay the taxes. When I say, hey, here's a tax bill, could you pay it today? Or we have funding partners, and a lot of them are at Quest IRA. That use their retirement funds. And
you might be wondering, why is this on here for a buy box presentation? These are really not part of your buy box, but they help support things that you try and do within the buy box, like how fast can you board can make a difference in where you want to purchase.
right,
Like you might have a servicer that no longer services
certain
a state that you're looking at. So that may make you say, hey, even though it's a perfect state, I'm not going to invest there. Or it might tell you, hey, I need to find more servicers.
Right. I thought this was right before our buy box. What happened to our buy box? Let me just look for it. Oh, I lost our buy box. We had our buy box listed here somewhere. Okay, so what is your first of all, what is our buy box? Non-performing, single family,
First lien. Actually,
not rural.
yeah, but
Made that
also
mistake.
in Michigan, Texas, we'll look even at
Indiana.
Georgia, we'll look at Indiana as well. We used to look at Illinois, but due to some changes there, we're hesitant there.
Yeah.
You'll notice we don't mention Arizona, we don't mention California,
New York,
we're not
New
mentioning
Jersey.
Florida. These are all high states where it's typically very expensive to buy notes. But we did mention Texas, which is also expensive. But we have connections and infrastructure
And boots on the ground there.
in Texas. So for us to buy in Texas would be, and to implement and execute, whether it's non-performing or performing, tends to be cheaper than someone who doesn't have this kind of infrastructure. So I would also say that we also have a buy box criteria on purchasing at about 100,000 per note. Why 100,000? It used to be 50,000, but many of those notes have that are down at that level now, if they're first lien, tend to be very, very, very distressed and have been on the market for quite a while. At 100,000, you're starting to get into areas that are C to C plus and into close to B.
Right. Right. The other one that we didn't mention, which is any house that's on a 2-bedroom, 1 bath and under 1,000 square feet. So again, that's less of a buy box issue, but we bought a note and took it back in Georgia, and it said on the tax record it was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath.
No,
And it was a 3-1, and it was a 1-1 because it mixed up the records with the neighbor, which was the father and the sister or something. And so, when you get back houses and you go, oh, it's only this much, or
Yeah.
it's built in 1908 and there is a dirt basement.
But on the other
know.
hand, that very note, we did, when we looked at the
Yeah.
location, we
Yeah.
also considered, could it be turned into an Airbnb?
Right.
Now, that one we did have to take back, and we
Because
ended
there
up
was a second
selling,
lien.
and we ended up selling it, and then it turns out that the person who bought it turned it into an Airbnb.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That was in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
So, Mark, we're happy that we're done.
when you also look at buying outside your
Yeah, this is what I was.
your buy box,
Yeah.
there's generally, like for us, we don't want to deal rural. But we violated that on occasion, and those have generally been the toughest notes
Just one of them.
to rehab. Not quite
Yeah.
what.
And then another buy box that we
because-
violated is that we want owner occupied. We didn't say owner occupied, with people who are on the title, on the, in the property. We do buy land contracts, but what we found out is one of our titles were not clear, and we had a person on the mortgage was different than the person in the house, and this extended our timeline considerably, and it wasn't a clear title, and we spent a lot of money in loss mitigation. And we did return our all the investment, and we did make a little bit of money, but we didn't make that much money. So
We didn't make
it's
as
our
much as
if
we
you go to
had targeted.
YouTube and you can find Phil and Mel Jacob, you'll see our longest note, and it's in there, and we tell you about that. So if you want to watch some case studies, we don't have to do this. This is about our multifamily buy box. But if you want to get connected, you can set up a call on Calendly, Jacob Associates, or give me a call and pick another time, and then, or just email us, jacob@jacobassociates.com. And yeah, so Mark, we're going to end the recording, and thanks you for joining us.